Here we go again, episode 7 of Undertaking the Colts, and we come back 2-1. And let me tell you, last episode I ended with me eating my shorts and eating pretty much everything in sight if we pulled off this win in Baltimore. And here we are at 2-1, having won an overtime thriller off of the foot of Matt Gay, calling game time, if you will. I tell you what, I have never been more surprisingly shocked by the Indianapolis Colts, and I'd say 2, maybe 3 seasons, JB.
No, man, you hit the nail on the head right there. I mean, I had a buddy text me yesterday, and he was like, "I still can't believe that they won that game," and I'm like, honestly, I feel in a weird way, almost like I'm in shock, like I wasn't acknowledging that they actually won the game. Like I feel like I don't know. I'm one of those people that like I scream at my TV when things aren't going right, like and at the end of the game on Sunday, I was just kind of like, what?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I didn't go nuts. I just kind of was like, did that really just happen that way? Like, I mean, it kind of felt like it was meant to be, especially with some of the no calls that we got in overtime, and we can get into all that. But man, what a win! What a gritty, nasty looking win, and we'll take it.
Shane Steichen put it best in his post-game locker room talk. I mean, and even his press conference afterwards with the media, he just kept saying resilience over and over and over again, and he's absolutely right. This was nothing but resilience by the Indianapolis Colts. Down to your backup quarterback. We've already got, if you will, a backup running back starting as well. Who now we'll get into it later, but I'm now convinced Zach Moss is going to be the starter for the rest of the season and carry 90% of the workload based off of the performances these last 2 weeks. The defense continues to rock and roll at a high level pace. And I even texted a couple buddies this as well, and you and I may have chatted about it, but oh my dear Lord have mercy. I cannot express how gratifying it is to have belief in a field goal kicker again.
Yeah, no, there's a reason that you pay the big bucks to sign the free agent. I think we were all because I remember free agency rolling around, and we're like, all right, where are we going to spend our money? We got some money to spend. What are we gonna? And it's like we wait around, and then it's like Adam Schefter. The Colts have signed kicker Matt Gay from the Rams, and we're like, that's terrific. We've really gone out on a limb here, but you know what? We're all eating some crow right now because we now see the value of having somebody that you can rely on. And when you look back on the Frank Reich era, there's a lot of times that we could point to where I'm sure he would say he went for it on fourth down primarily because he didn't feel super comfortable in the kicking game. At the end of the Vinatieri era, where he sadly just got father time caught up with him, and then the inconsistency with McLaughlin and
Excuse me.
Rigoberto, and so I mean, you hit the nail on the head, man. It's great to have a kicker you can rely on where he's just absolutely money from 50 plus.
And absolutely money. It's not even the fact that he made him, it's the fact that he was 5 for 5 and every kick was piped right down the middle of the uprights with distance too. I mean his long of the game was 54 if I remember correctly, and he had an extra 10 yards to it and then some. Whereas, we talked about one of the key things going into this game was special teams might end up playing a huge factor, and obviously it did. And I was texting you too that nowhere anywhere we go on the field is Justin Tucker range, and sure enough, they trot Tucker out for a 61-yard field goal, and I'm sweating bullets at this point, and I'm just kind of saying to myself, well, here we go. Tucker's about to pipe this down the middle. Comes off of his foot, and it's just got that perfect trajectory that he's done time and time again. And I'm like, yep, there it is. But it falls short.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it was 8 yards short too. It wasn't really even that close. I don't
yeah, I
think.
don't think he hit it true, even though it looked good. I don't think he hit it true. And if you ask Justin Tucker, he's going to say he's going to make that kick 80-90% of the time, which he will. Let's be honest here.
Well, arguably, if there's any other, if there's no rain and sloppy conditions on the field, he makes that kick. I mean,
Yeah.
there's really no question about it. I think 100% that miss had to do with, I mean, you could see him when he ran out on the field. He was kind of digging his cleats into the grass, trying to get a feel for what kind of footing he was going to have, and which makes it even all the more impressive for a game where Matt Gay goes 5 for 5 with 4 out of the 5 being 50 plus. When you've got rain and crappy weather and
Hmm.
not the air temperature conditions that you want that are ideal for kicking. I mean, and like you said, every single one of them split the uprights was about 3/4 of the way up. I mean, it was just money every time. Every time they showed him on the camera, even the camera angles, he just walking around with his tee, like, oh, you don't need me yet. All right, I'll just stand over here, like just Mr. Cool, ice in his veins. I'm like, this guy's awesome.
Yeah, this dude has a pair on him the size of muskmelons, if you will, just rolling around in a wheelbarrow like the South Park episode. Um, anyway, sorry for the rough reference, ladies and gentlemen, but here we go. So let's get into the nitty gritty of this game. It was ugly. It was hard fought. The referees let them play. I mean, overall, the penalties, there wasn't any knick-knack penalties called. I didn't really see, but there could have been 10, 15 penalties per side. They just, whether it was holding, pass interference, face masks, they just let it go. Now, reason being, I couldn't tell you. I don't know if this was a
Yeah.
young referee crew. I don't know if they were told just to let them play out. I mean, shoot, Vegas could be in people's pockets. I'm half kidding here, but I'm just throwing things out.
That's always been a question of mine when it comes to officiating for any sport. Like, you always see, and I like one specific example is I always notice in Big Ten basketball games, they'll show the referees at halftime, like in their little referee quarters, like looking at looking over a iPad or something, like trying to like look back at the first half, see what they meant, and it's like, and then you hear like Gene Steratore or somebody like that, whoever the rules expert is for the game, and they're like asking them, oh yeah, well, they're just trying to pour over it, see what mistakes they made in the first half and see how they're going to call the game in the second half. It's like how they're going to call the game in the second half. Shouldn't they call the game in the second half like they do every game, every half, every quarter of sport? So it's like
Officiating's
you
officiating, or allegedly it's supposed to be.
right. So you come into a game like this where like that is a veteran crew. I mean, that's Cleet Blakeman. I think he's been around for 10 plus years, and I always recognize his crew because he's got like a side judge or a line judge who has like rec spec goggles, and I always see that guy throwing flags. But yeah, you're exactly right, man. I don't understand really. It was a very gritty game. I think we got the edge on a lot of that. There was definitely some missed calls on both teams, but there's a few procedural penalties. I think our offensive line had a couple stupid ones again, which just have to get cleaned up because
Yeah.
eventually they're going to start costing you real big, in games, and that's how you turn wins into losses. But overall, it seemed like it all evened out. I think the Ravens were complaining about the pass interference, but then you've got a missed face mask on Michael Pittman, all kinds of stuff. So I mean, it all kind of leveled out in the end. I think I don't if I'm a Ravens fan, I don't think I would be blaming the referees for this loss.
Right. And there's some Baltimore fans out there that are still, as we talked about in our preview episode, that are just still bitter, diehard Baltimore Colts fans that are just still tilted about the Colts leaving Baltimore in the way that they did, and the world's against them because the Colts are in town, and so on and so forth. But that's a sad story that's not worth my time, not worth anybody's time, really. I want to start off actually on the Baltimore Ravens side because this was a matchup between two very, very good coached teams. Because John Harbaugh is now, I believe, in his 15th season. He's won a Super Bowl there. It seems like he's won the division half of the years that he's been there, if not more, maybe two thirds. Excuse me. And I had said last week too that Indianapolis, for whatever reason, plays Baltimore exceptionally well, and this was no exception. And granted, yes, Baltimore had a lot of injuries. However, they still came to play. That was overall, on paper, a better team than the Indianapolis Colts. And their defense proved it, especially Kyle Hamilton from the safety coming down, blitzing off of the edge. He had 3 sacks alone in the first quarter against Gardner Minshew, which that's another thing. Gardner Minshew needs to get rid of the ball there several times because he saw Hamilton coming, backpedaled, I think, on 2 of the 3 sacks that he took, and still held on to the ball. Like, throw it out of bounds, man. Come on. But overall, with Baltimore's defense, I mean, they were after it. I think they registered 5 sacks. They had 7 other quarterback hits. They had 5 passes defended, and I think another couple of tackles for losses. Like, Baltimore's defense, as advertised and has been advertised for the last 25 years, Baltimore's defense will get after you. And kudos to them having overcome injuries. Um, they played their ASSs off entirely, and the fact that we were able to put up the numbers that we did speaks not only to Shane Steichen's offensive creativity, but again, the nitty gritty and the resilience of the players to go out, execute the game plan to the best of their abilities, and keep us on the field to give our defense enough time to recoup, because that was the problem with Jacksonville. Our defense just didn't get enough rest, and it just looked like they got gassed. Whereas this time, against a much tougher opponent, they clearly came out every possession. And other than a few Lamar Jackson breakaways, I thought they played really, really well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, to start with your point on the Ravens defense, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. Are I think prior to watching this game, if you had asked me what was going to win this game for the Colts and what was going to lose it, I was going to say the defense would win it, but the offense was going to lose it for us. And really, what happened was the defense won it for us, but the offense did just enough to win it for us too. I mean, it was kind of an interesting game because the defense gave the offense a short field a couple times, and I ultimately think that's what ended up being the difference in this whole thing because the first couple drives were rough. We had a few punts. It didn't look good. And I think the Baltimore defense, like you said, was fantastic. They're a top 10 defense in the NFL, and they proved it out there. Frankly, the Baltimore offense lost it for them. Our defense forced turnovers. We did not turn the ball over, and that's the difference here. We ended up with an extra field goal there that fourth quarter rolls around after the Ravens scored 2 touchdowns there. We're not within just a few points. We're down 7-8 points there, so it's a big swing. Um, to have a defense that can force turnovers, and so to your point, kudos to the Ravens defense, but even more of a kudos to our defense because they absolutely won this game for us. And the offense did just enough to get us to scrape by.
100% agree. 100% agree. And, coming to think of it too, the fact that our defense has already shuffled around a few pieces. And I mean, you texted me on game day. We saw Daryl Baker Jr. was inactive, and we had noted that he has struggled recently, especially in week 2. Excuse me, I got a bug in my throat. It's kind of annoying. But with Daryl Baker Jr. struggling, we saw Juju Brents get activated, and he made an impact, having played, I think it was about 77% of the defensive snaps. I mean, he comes in and chases down a ball carrier, peanut punch, force fumble, and recovers it. Like, way to make an impact, kid, in your first NFL game.
And just as impressive as that is, I think it was actually on maybe the Ravens. It must have been the Ravens' second or third drive. he actually was on Mark Andrews across the middle, and he timed it up perfectly and got his hand in there and knocked the ball away. I mean, it would have been a catch, first down for Mark Andrews, and I think it was third down, and he forced basically a 3-and-out on that play. So the first time we were able to really see him healthy, great debut, and again another bright piece to the future of this team. I think we talked a couple episodes ago about we've got this dynamic, especially on the defense, of savvy veteran playmakers like the Grover Stewarts and the DeForest Buckners and the Kenny Moores. And we let a couple guys walk. And, we talked about this at the beginning of the season, Yannick Ngakoue. We trade away Gilly. And I think we're seeing the plan of Chris Ballard take shape here. Go up and you take Juju Brents in the second or third round. You get some of these younger guys. Samson Abukum, I think he was, I can't remember where he was at last year. I
He
never even
he
heard of the guy
backed up
until
he
training.
backed up Nick Bosa in San Fran.
Yeah. So, I mean, these are guys that, you're bringing in young people who are making their mark, and, you're starting to see, year two of, the defense under, why am I
Gus
forgetting our
Bradley.
defensive coordinator? Gus Bradley, uh, the new Legion of Boom, so to speak, taking formation. So it's interesting to see these young pieces start to chip away at those older guys for some of these key plays, and it's kind of fun to see the transformation.
It's funny that you bring back the Legion of Boom reference that we've alluded to a couple times in previous episodes, because if you remember in their prime, that vaunted secondary of Seattle of Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor, Earl Thomas III, and I cannot ever remember the free safety's name, um, but the traits that they had were fairly similar but extremely different. Where you had Richard Sherman on the outside at 6'2", 6'3", top of his class, Stanford grad, incredible IQ, both intelligence wise and football IQ, and he just baited receivers left and right and locked them down like we would see Darrell Revis back in the day do. And then you had the enforcer, Cam Chancellor, would come down in the box and lay the biggest piece of wood on a running back trying to get outside of the tackle. And I'm kind of starting to see resemblances. Juju Brents is 6'2". Uh, Julian Blackman is 6'1" or 6'2", and is coming down and recording double-digit tackles in almost every game thus far, a la Cam Chancellor. And then you've got, you know, Rodney Thomas, same name as Earl Thomas, Roman as the other safety. And then you really want to start putting pieces together. You got Zaire Franklin, who is very, very similar with a Bobby Wagner, who's still putting up huge numbers in Seattle's middle linebacker position.
Yeah.
The pieces and the similarities are far too eerie, and it gets me more and more excited the more and more I see this unit play together, and the more great games they stack back to back to back.
Right, and there's no point in reinventing the wheel. If you had something that was successful, why not try to replicate that? And then you've got locking up all that in the secondary is Kenny Moore, who he's only 5'11", 6 foot, but the guy, he can guard anybody. I mean, he can make plays on anybody. He hits like a ton of bricks. So you know having some of these young guys that are able to learn alongside you know Kenny Moore and some of these other people like Zaire Franklin, who are a little bit more polished veterans, it's great to have. And you see, especially with their size, like you said, with Juju, I mean, he's 6'2". If he can play like that and guard tight ends like that, I mean, that's a weapon in
Mm-hmm.
itself. So, yeah, I was, we basically kind of run on here about the defense. I mean, I was thoroughly impressed with the game plan that was put together because, admittedly, the first quarter I had to listen on the radio, unfortunately, but I came back and I watched every play from the first quarter. And that first drive for the Ravens, I mean, I was like, I think I texted you. I'm like, I took the under in this game, and I think the Ravens might hit it by
You,
themselves.
you did too.
I mean, it was like everything. Matt Taylor's like, he couldn't even get a mouthful out, but by the time, they'd already got another first down for 14 yards or something. And I'm like, oh boy, this could be ugly. But you know what? They took a punch in the face on that first drive. They made changes. They made adjustments. They let Lamar get his yards on the air and on the ground. He scored 2 touchdowns. But other than that, they locked down the entire receiving core. I mean, Zay Flowers had 8 catches for 48 yards, but nobody else had a touchdown on the Ravens, and they pretty much limited their ability to have any big explosive plays. So couple that with the fact that the Colts did exactly what you and I had talked about on the preview pod. They the first drive and to an extent the drive in the third quarter, they struggled to keep Lamar out of the running lanes. But you could see the times when the Colts could collapse the pocket around Lamar Jackson and force him to either, roll out of a running lane, but somewhere where he's just rolling east and west, or force him into a play where he's got to make a bad throw, or push him back in the pocket where he's trying to scramble around. He ends up fumbling the ball. That is where you get a guy like that to make mistakes. You collapse the pocket around him, contain them, and that's an adjustment that the Colts made that frankly won them the game.
Absolutely. And, every time it looked like the Ravens would make an adjustment, the Colts would adjust right back. And I want to give a couple shout outs to some positional coaches that I don't think get enough love. Uh, First one being defensive line coach Nate Ollie. I mean, to coach up these guys, I mean, you got as we've mentioned, your vets like Buck and Grove, but your young guys like Quiddy Pay, Samson Ebukam, and your rotational pieces. Taven Bryan, I think, had another sack again. Um, I mean, to coach these guys and to have them consistently keep their gap integrity for 4 3/4 or four full quarters and 3/4 of overtime, if you will. Um, that is exceptional coaching and exceptional effort overall by the defensive line.
Yeah,
And then even the defensive backs with one of the greatest defensive backs coach in football, in my opinion, Ron Miles. The fact that he's taking this super young secondary outside of Kenny Moore, and he's basically just throwing them to the wolves, into the fire, if you will. And it's like, hey,
yeah,
your guys are going to go do this. I don't care what you think. Like, go do this. And they have stepped up immensely. And the fact that they held Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews and company to very, very limited damage says something not only about the players but the coaching and the scheme.
yeah. I mean, it just proves that one player can't beat you. It was sure close, but we ended up pulling out the win. But no, I'm glad you called out Nate Ollie and Ron Miles. I mean, starting with Ron Miles, he's a Bradley guy. He came with him from the Raiders. I'm not sure if he was with them when they were in Seattle, but he knows what Gus Bradley wants to get out of the secondary, and he understands how they need to play their coverage. And so he's bringing these guys along very quickly, frankly. I mean, because you look at Juju's a rookie. I don't. Daryl Baker Jr. might have been here towards the end of last year, but he wasn't here the full year. So some of these guys are new to the organization and are learning on the fly, like you said, throwing them into the fire, and we're seeing success. I think if when we talked about at the beginning of the season, if you would have asked us what our biggest concern was on defense, it was the secondary.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, they have not cost us any shot at a game yet.
Mm-hmm.
They even the game that they struggled in with Jacksonville, they still played well. You can't cover everybody when you've got 4 or 5 deep wide receivers that are above average. And so frankly, they've exceeded expectations so far this year. And then in terms of Nate Ollie, the funny thing about him is he's like damn near the same age as Defoe. He's probably what, 32, 33, 34, somewhere in that range. So when it's funny when they show the camera angles, DeForest Buckner will run off the sideline. I've seen a couple shots where he's talking to Nate Ollie and they're looking at an iPad or something. They're like laughing, pointing back and forth, and then Defoe's like pointing, I think we should do this kind of thing. Like that's the kind of thing that players respect a coach that can, take their feedback and we can learn from it because those are the guys that are on the field seeing what's happening in front of them. Not everything can be adjusted via a coach's box or from the sideline. You have to get feedback from the players in the field. So I agree completely with those two, call outs because our defense, in my opinion, so far this year has been far exceeding my expectations, and I would even say is pretty close to elite.
Yeah, it's right there on that borderline. And the last player I want to call out before we shift gears into our offense is our second outside corner who is quietly having a really good year, and that's Dallas Flowers. If you remember him last year, he was like number 4 or 5 on the cornerback depth chart, and he was, I think, punt returner only. And he flashed a few times when he got on the field last year. And my lord, he has taken 5, 6, 7 steps from his game last year. Like I know he's had a couple of struggles here and there, but he's learned. And watching a couple of plays that he was involved in, you can see the maturity coming along. Because I believe he's only 24, 25 or whatever it is, but you can see the growth, and it's just gonna keep getting better.
Yep, I agree.
So, shifting gears from defense with, of course, Zaire Franklin, 15 tackles, leading the NFL, averaging 15 a game. Bless up to Zaire Franklin. Offensively, with the weather being what it was, we saw 35 rushing attempts, all from running backs, for about a buck 40, averaging 4 yards a carry. Excuse me. But it wasn't the fact that we ran it so much. It was the overall effectiveness of the run, especially with the very first Colts offensive play of the game, with Zach Moss busting it up the left side for I think it was like 25, 30 yards. That started a really good tone for me. Now, granted, as you mentioned, our first couple of offensive drives were less than ideal, but you could see the gears turning. And with Gardner Minshew in there, again, as the veteran, savvy backup quarterback who's just seems to find a way to win everywhere he's gone. His teammates respect him, his coaches respect him, everyone, loves him on and off the field. For him to come in and go into a hostile environment like Baltimore and be able to general offensive drives consistently to get, whether it's multiple first downs to give the defense a breather or get scores, because we only had one touchdown in the game. Everything else was field goals. But the touchdown pass he had to Zach Moss on that halfback wheel route was a thing of beauty. You couldn't have placed a better ball.
No, he couldn't have. I mean, he did exactly what you needed him to do. We talked about this when he came in last week against the Texans. You can only ask so much out of a backup quarterback because while Gardner Minshew is a savvy veteran, you still have to recognize that during a normal week of practice, he's maybe getting a quarter of the reps, if
If
that.
that.
When Anthony Richardson's healthy, so to have your backup quarterback come in and go 27 for 44 for 227 and a touchdown, no interceptions, that's about all you can ask for. And I think, you and I even mentioned in our keys to the game in the preview episode, we're going to have to rely on our running game to do something. If we can't get anything out of it, we're screwed basically. Because, I think while that's a solid outing from Gardner, I don't think he had any more in him than that. That was about what we were going to get.
Right.
So if you don't get 120 yards out of Zach Moss, then we're probably not winning that game. If we get 50 yards and he's running for a yard and a half per carry, it's probably not so bright on this episode right now. So I was thoroughly impressed with the running game and what our offensive line was able to do. I mean, Trey Sermon getting literally signed, I think, like 4
It was
days
like on
prior to the game,
Thursday
3
or
days
something.
prior to the game.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he was more valuable and he gave more valuable reps in this game than any other running back on the Colts so far that not named Zach Moss.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that he could do that on 2 or 3 days, luckily he knew the playbook from playing in Philadelphia under Shane. He had a pretty good idea what he was coming into, but there was a couple snaps where Zach Moss got a little nicked up and went off to the side. The fact that you can bring somebody in like Trey Sermon and rely on him to get you positive yardage. I mean, we're not asking for the world. When they handed the ball off to him, he got 2 or 3 yards. I'm like, perfect. 2nd and 7. That's all you can ask for in this scenario when you're playing against a defense as tough as the Ravens. So, no, I agree completely with your assessment of the running game and how critical that was. And I do think Gardner played well. That's about all we're going to get out of him. I think week in and week out. Hopefully, we have AR back next week. But credit to Gardner for a gritty win on the road there against the top 10 defense. But I think you kind of alluded to it earlier. But my one dislike here on the offense, excuse me, the run blocking was great. Pass blocking was a little suspect. And obviously, I think you said we gave up 5 sacks. It felt like anytime Kyle Hamilton came up anywhere near the line of scrimmage, he was in the backfield in 0.2 seconds, and he was either completing a sack or rushing Gardner Minshew into a bad throw. And that's kind of where my dislike comes in. I think blocking scheme breakdowns. I think that's my big takeaway as a dislike, because you saw it 3 times in the first half. How do you not come out of it in the second half and make an adjustment? And it wasn't like, I think at one point the broadcast was like, yeah, Kyle Hamilton is doing a great job of masking his blitz. I'm like, he's lined up like 2 feet from the defensive end and he's just blitzing right in the backfield. Like, that's not masking a blitz whatsoever. So I don't know if that's on Gardner or if that's on the plays that Shane was calling, but if we are going to rely on Gardner to start in Anthony Richardson's place again this weekend, that's something that the Rams will exploit if it's on the film. So we've got to practice that this week and figure out how to check out or get the running back to pick up that blitz, because Gardner's not Anthony Richardson. He's not able to get out of the pocket that quick. He's going to get murdered on those plays.
Hmm.
So that was my one kind of boo-boo on the offense, alongside with the procedural penalties that I mentioned earlier with the offensive line. So blocking, great on running game. Blocking on the pass game needs some work, but didn't matter. We got out of there with a W.
Yep. And I want to get into a little bit of a spiel here. This is also, I've been noticing this has been being mentioned several times this week already, via other podcasts, other networks. Um, but with what we've been seeing over the last couple of weeks, Deion Jackson had a very poor game week 1, healthy and active week 2, cut. Daryl Baker Jr., epic struggles week 2, healthy and active this week. Is he going to get cut? I don't know. But outside of those two decisions, if you look at, as I've mentioned before, the Colts release their official snap counts every Monday after the game. And I've been noticing a fluctuation in snap percentages on certain players. For example, this week we saw Zach Moss I think he played still close to 80% of the snaps. Having a backup like Trey Sermon, who, by the way, was in Philly with Shane Steichen, so that was probably an easy sign to get him to come in because he's familiar with Shane's system. Alec Pierce's snaps were down. Josh Downs' snaps were up. And then the tight ends were a lot more divided in terms of percentages. Whereas Drew Ogletree got several more snaps than he did. McKenzie's has slowly been upticking a little bit. Granson's snaps went down. And then on the defensive side, Shaq Leonard played about 50% of the snaps, if you noticed. Because I didn't see 53 a lot on the field Sunday, and I was curious to see what his number was coming out on Monday, which was yesterday at the time of recording this. And Shaq, I think, played 54, 55% of the snaps, something like that. EJ Speed took more of the snaps. And so, long story short, where I'm getting with this is accountability from Shane Steichen and the coaching staff. They are holding players hostage to poor play, which is what has been missing the past couple of seasons, and what the Frank Reich regime, if you will, sort of loafed on was, and I think that was one of Jeff Saturday's biggest fixes when he came in last year. Now, because everybody was all up in flames about like, well, why the ever loving cuss word, cuss word, cuss word would you bring in Jeff Saturday? He has no coaching experience, blah 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 blah. He was a part of the Peyton Manning years, and if anybody who knows anything about Colts football, Peyton Manning was the judge, jury, and executioner when it came to accountability for those vaunted Colts teams back in the day. And if anybody missed a meeting, was late, was even seconds late to getting to a certain place at a certain time, Peyton would get in your ear about it, and you would live to regret your life at that point. And I think that was what was missing. Jeff Saturday comes in, having been a part of that, knows what to look for in successful teams and how to hold teams accountable. Basically, had to just sweep the rug clean last year, and now we get Shane Steichen in, and it clearly is showing that players are going to be held to a high standard. And if you're not going to meet that standard, both in practice, off the field, and in games, you're about to pay the price until you fix it. And if you don't fix it, you have no business being on this roster or practice squad. Go find work somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, I know that McAfee was one of the people that brought that up about Jeff Saturday and pointing out actually when the whole Jonathan Taylor drama was playing out, McAfee was like, there were guys in the Colts locker room that took notice that Jonathan Taylor as a leader on the team was not holding other players accountable, not really holding himself accountable. So I'm glad that you brought up Jeff Saturday because I think you're right. I mean, as big of a debacle sort of and sideshow that turned into be, he did a great job of cleaning up habits. He wasn't coming in there to save the season and win all the games. And the guy had never coached in his life. He was coming to change the culture, and you can see with both the leaders on our team and our coaching staff, they've taken that. Ballard knew what he was looking for in a coach. Steichen comes in, like you said, there's no BS anymore. If you don't play well and you are not guys like, DeForest Buckner or Darius Leonard, or sorry, Shaq Leonard, they might have a bad game. They're not going to get cut because we know what they're capable of. Daryl Baker Jr., if you have a bad game, I'm sorry, my guy, but there's other players out there that are just as good as you, if not better. So you're playing for your spot every week. So a guy that like him that came from being a starting corner for the Colts opening day to theoretically, could be off the roster, like you said. I mean, it's all about accountability, and that's, folks, when you look at the record, 2-1, that's how you turn around a team that won, what was it, 4 games last year? I mean, that's what you have to do. You have to hold people accountable to play their position, whether they like it or not. And it's funny that you bring up Daryl Baker Jr. specifically because a guy that I was kind of impressed with in the preseason was Darius Rush. And unfortunately, I was just looking while you were talking. It looks like the Chiefs snapped him up right away. I was hoping that maybe he was still floating out there, but there's there's players out there that are Daryl Baker Jr.'s caliber that are sitting on people, on waivers or on people's practice squads, things like that. So, you know, you got to kind of play for your seat every week.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's starting to pay dividends. Clearly, players are playing hard. Players are doing everything they can, big or small, to help the team win. And getting back into the offensive statistics and performance, while there was a few flashes of explosiveness, I was looking a lot at the little details of the offensive game. And For Gardner, Shane Steichen had to simplify the game plan a little bit. Obviously, you can still run a lot of the complex concepts, but you're not going to get all the crazy bootlegs and motions and quarterback sort of mobility that you will with Richardson for obvious reasons. But one player I do want to point out that I actually have watched now 3 times since the Ravens game via highlights is Josh Downs, who led the team in targets with 12. He had 8 catches for 57 yards. His longest catch was 12. But we mentioned this last week that it seems like Reggie Wayne is in his ear. And this game clearly proved that not only is Reggie in his ear, but he's taken it to heart. And he is establishing himself as that third receiver, possibly could be number 2 if Alec Pierce decides to continue to not play well. We'll get into that momentarily. But Josh Downs is becoming a force of nature really quickly. And there's going to be a breakout 150-yard game coming. I feel that in my gut. His route running was again crisp as all get out on a really bad field, not really bad, excuse me, really bad conditions on grass. And there was a route that he ran that I watched on a replay from the high top aerial view above the stadium that they have up there. Josh Downs did, I think it was an 8 to 10 yard out route that he put some Michael Jackson jukes on this dude and got him. I think that was his catch of 12 yards for a first down on the left hand side.
Mm-hmm.
And he just bolted to the sideline and this dude the corner was turned around like nobody's business. And it was just such a fast, crisp, and clean route that I get so excited thinking about what possibilities you could do with Josh Downs.
Yeah, and I mean they're using him for exactly what he needs to do right now. I think his skill set is capable. We haven't seen the Colts take hardly any deep shots so far this season, and when they do, they've gone to he who shall not be named right now that we're gonna talk about because you mentioned him already, and I have thoughts as well. But Downs has way more capability than what they're using him for right now. But what they're using him for is to pick off that soft zone area in the middle of the field, get those chunk plays. And you know what that does? That opens up Michael Pittman Jr. to have more room to operate on the sideline and also, frees him up to be able to go sometimes one-on-one with a corner and get some more chunk plays. I mean, I think that if you look back at some of the film from last year, part of the disaster that happened beyond just Matt Ryan having zero time to do anything in the backfield was it was almost impossible for Michael Pittman Jr. to get open because secondaries were having a field day just walking around with Ashton Doolin and Pierce. So I think having a twitchy, guy like Downs that can currently, do what is being asked of him, which is get open in the middle of the field. You've got a tight end on one side trying to get open over there, and then you got Downs kind of moving around in the middle of the field trying to get open. It only helps your outside receivers try to have a better opportunity to get open themselves. So I think I agree. He's doing a great job.
For sure. And let's just bite the bullet and get into your
I have one more good guy I want to give some shine to on the offense.
before you turn
And
sour and get all sorts of salty.
yeah,
Okay, noted.
yeah, yeah. I got one more guy. Obviously, we mentioned Zach Moss already. He was kind of my player of the game on the offense, but a guy I wanted to give massive props to was Wesley French
French
because
fries.
I mean that guy. I think especially in the running game. But I saw a couple times when like they blitzed linebackers. Like I think they blitzed Patrick Queen at one point, and he picked it up. I was so impressed with him, and it felt almost like we didn't skip a beat from Ryan Kelly. I'm not
Yeah,
saying I don't know what his PFF grade was or anything like that, but when you look at the other side with the Ravens, they had a backup center in there. That guy was snapping the ball into Lamar Jackson's groin area when he wasn't even looking.
he
Like that
rolled it
guy,
on the field one time.
yeah, all over the place, and that's the exact kind of dangers you have with a backup center. And he came in. We had no snap issues. I don't recall any plays that I would directly attribute to him. Most of the dangerous, sacks and everything like that came off the edge from Kyle Hamilton. So if anything, that was either, Zach Moss or Braden Smith's fault, but I thought he played great. So huge props to him for stepping in and filling in for Ryan Kelly. And even that, I don't even know. There was another guy. I should have looked him up, but he came in for like 3 plays when I think Will Fries was getting taped up or something. Somebody we pulled off the practice squad I'd never even heard of, and he came in and his the first play. He just like was a
Jo-
stone wall against
Josh Sills,
Josh
he was a
Fields.
depth guard in Philly. Once again, another Philly.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I thought when it came to those guys, the struggles that we had in the pass blocking game, was frankly mostly on Braden Smith's side, and he struggled with a couple procedural or at least one procedural penalty as well. But
Hmm.
he whatever. We'll let it slide. We won. Who cares? But kudos to French Fries because Will Fries played pretty well too, but French really stepped out up to me. Especially in the absence of Ryan Kelly.
For sure. And I do want to elaborate on the offensive line here for a couple minutes, not very long, because obviously we have a tilt session to get to where we lean harder than the Leaning Tower of Pisa. But again, let's just get some more positivity in here because we did win, and positivity definitely is outflowing the negative right now. So with the O line, because in your next segment, I'm going to go to PFF and start looking at grades for fun. And Bernard Ryman played a good game. I don't think he played elite from what I was seeing at, but he played well and he kept the blind side clean. I think Q had an all right game again, but Wesley French, as you said, stepped all the way up. Will Fries did well. Um, and then, yeah, Braden Smith had a very, very rough game. I don't know if it was just the constant pressure they were throwing to his side and the block scheme got all skewed and it was a miscommunication. Like I don't know, but I mean, Braden Smith has played at an exceptionally high level before, but my lord, both. I mean, he just struggled mightily in this game, both with penalties, and he got bull rushed by Jadeveon Clowney a couple times. Um,
Frankly, he struggled a little bit last week too. I mean, it's not been. I would be curious to see what the grades show up for the PFF grades when you look at them because maybe we're missing something. You know what I mean? Because we're just kind of looking at it from the eye test right now. But that would be my assessment of the line was Smith was the definitely would be my lowest grade. Probably the left side of the line beyond that. I don't know. It would probably be either Ryman or Q because I thought the middle. I thought Fries and French, and who argued probably the two lowest paid guys on the offensive line. I thought looked pretty solid, but I'm curious what the grades were.
yeah, and that's kind of what I'm scrolling through right now. Um, Man, they actually PFF was extremely hard on Wesley French for whatever reason. This is where I sometimes don't agree with them, but because they're all high data folks, and sometimes I feel like they
And
don't watch the game. But hey, that's either neither here
it
nor
could
there.
it could it could be some sort of pressure that we didn't see on a play. You know what I mean? Like I guess from the eye test perspective, the plays that I saw that it was visibly noticeable where hey he stepped up and made a block there, and that is how you know we were able to break off a run or something like that, or it gave us just enough time. I think there was a few plays where Gardner literally got the ball out like right as the pocket was collapsing. So,
Yeah.
it probably doesn't show up great in the stats, but they held up and they did their job.
Well, I'm looking at Braden Smith right now, and he is based off of PFF's grading system. He has regressed darn near 14% in the pass block alone. He
Season
his
or
current pa-
since last
his
year?
current pass block grade for the year is 56.8 out of 100, which ranks 46th out of 66 tackles. Yeah, not ideal. And my favorite O lineman right now, Bernard Ryman, is 10th among all tackles in the NFL.
Well,
And that's
yeah,
overall grade. His
yeah.
pass block grade is 8th.
That just tells you. Braden's a guy who's been here for several years now, and he's been solid. But complacency kills.
Yeah,
You can't get complacent with your position, or like I said, there was a guy, Blake. Excuse me, Blake Freeland. I thought played really well in the
I did
preseason.
too.
Granted, he's kind of like where um, Bernard was last year, where I don't think his body is filled out enough for him to have a successful year as an NFL tackle. But you get him in a full year of practice and a full year in the Colts strength and nutritional program. And that's a guy that come next year, Braden Smith keeps playing, pretty subpar this year. That's a guy that's going to be right there pushing him for his job. So, hopefully we see some improvement. I think that's been a common theme on both sides of the ball so far this year. Some core veterans that haven't really showed up to play yet. And there needs to be a wake up call because folks, we're 2-1 at the top of the AFC South for the first time I think I saw in like 8 years or something. So the time has come to start trying again. If you're not giving it your all, I mean,
Yeah,
so
yeah, and I mean we've seen it before. Chris Ballard has no qualms cutting anybody. So
yeah.
I mean, so we'll see how that turns out. But um, let's go ahead. I mean, we've mentioned pretty much all of our kudos from coaching to individual players. So
I did have one more, I guess, before we get into the negative column. On the defensive side of the ball, I think you touched on him briefly, but another guy I've been ringing his praises for 3 weeks. Samson Abukum, a sack, 2 tackles for loss, a quarterback hit. He forced a fumble that Lamar recovered. Uh, that guy, I see why he was the starting edge rusher on the opposite of Quiddy Pay to start the year. He's absolutely deserved it, and because I think a lot of people, if you would have asked, would have thought Dio would have been starting across from Quiddy, and Abukum has impressed me in every single game off the edge, and I just wanted to continue to ring his praises because I saw it in the preseason. I didn't had no idea who the guy was, and I saw it in the preseason. I'm like, I'm marking this guy down as like keep my eye on him, and yeah, he's been extremely impressive in every
he's
game.
been lightning quick, not quite Robert Mathis quick, but he has been lightning quick off of that edge. And I did get corrected, by the way, because I've noticed a couple of weeks the announcers saying it Ebukam, and I was like, that's got to be wrong. But Samson Ebukam is of South African heritage, so that is the proper Ebukam is the proper pronunciation. So I stood corrected this weekend on that, and so I am now passing this knowledge to you. Which, by the way, fun fact.
This is another Okariki situation.
Yeah, Okereke. Well, fun fact: the Indianapolis Colts, for those of you who like random statistics or random facts, the Indianapolis Colts actually lead the NFL in number of African heritage players on their active 53-man roster.
Quiddy Pay is one of them as well, right?
Yes, Kwity Paye,
And then
Aduwabe Adewore, who
yeah,
who we drafted this year, and then you have Ebukam. There's another linebacker, defensive end. I'm trying to remember the name. This is, I mean, don't expect us to have the entire roster memorized. I promise you, we're not perfect. Clearly. Anyways,
Saguna Luke,
so yeah, Alubi, thank you. Which we're probably botching that name somehow. So
yeah.
no disrespect to anybody. We're just American people who are trying to
Just two morons from the Midwest. So
exactly.
it's a break.
Okay, so all right, let's begin our session of tilt, anger-inducing negatives, if you will. I'll let you kick this one off because you, over these last few previews or review post-game reviews, you seem to be the gentleman who's coming into this segment most hostile between the two of us. So I want you to go ahead and just get your anger out right now. Who did you not like from Sunday?
I only have one guy, and I've talked about him every week so far. I'm not seeing it. He's probably a great blocker, like you said, in the plays that I can't tell, because they don't show it on the screen. But Alec Pierce has got to catch the ball over 30 yards. He is the only person that we're throwing the ball to over 30 yards in the air, I should say. And I mean, that pass from Gardner should have been, I think he was either would have been down on the 1 yard line or damn near a touchdown. And you can tell me all you want about defensive backs making great plays. That may be the case, but good wide receivers find a way to make the play. Devontae Adams finds a way to make that play. I'm not saying we need that out of Pierce to be Devontae Adams. We just need him to catch the ball. And like I said, anybody who wants to argue about that, look at Michael Pittman, overtime reception. Two guys coming at him. One of them nearly took his head off. He holds onto the ball, comes down. We get a huge first down. That is what elite NFL wide receivers are able to do. And if Alec Pierce strives to be a top end or elite wide receiver someday, he has got to consistently catch the ball. And I mean, that's really all I've got to say about it. His stats are, he had 3 catches for 43 yards. That's great. He had an awesome one over the middle. Perfect. He was pretty much, untouched. It was a incredible throw by Minshew that damn near, I think, got picked off. But it was a situation where he had nobody around him. A guy tried to jump the route and he was, safe and clean, easy catch. It seems like when contact is initiated with him down the field, he struggles to gather himself and be able to make a play on the ball. And that's got to improve if he's going to keep playing in the NFL. We can't have him as a second wide receiver if he's unable to make plays down the field. So I know we talked about the play last year with Matt Ryan. He had one great catch so far in his career. He's going to have to do more than that to keep up, his position in the NFL. So that's my soapbox rant. 7 targets, 3 catches. Just not going to get it done for me.
Are you good? Did you get that off your chest? You feel better?
And I will say the other pass, there was one other one where I think it was just a horrific throw by Gardner Minshew. So I'm not putting that one on his feet. It was down the field and he was somewhat wide open because I think it was
DB tripped over his
uh,
shoelaces.
yeah, wasn't it Ronald Darby, I think, fell over or something, and he was wide open. That was just a terrible throw. But the one down the field that he dropped that we should have been on the 1 yard line. I mean, that really chapped my you know what.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. I don't want to give up on the kid, but he just. It seems like every week there's 1 to 2 plays that just leave me wanting more, and there's just much more to be desired, especially at the quote number 2 wide receiver position. And I mean, he did have one really good catch. I don't know if it was fourth quarter or overtime, right there on the sideline, where again it was a thread the needle throw by Minshew, and he kept his feet inbound, made the catch. Good for him, but it wasn't really contested. He didn't have a DB like shoving a hand in his face or ripping his helmet off, a la Michael Pittman. But again, I keep saying I'm going to wait till week 6 to reserve for final judgment. But I don't know. He just seems to keep making it more and more difficult to keep faith in. And like I said, I have seen the plays where he's done well in the run block game, and yeah, he's had a couple defensive backs in his faces on contested catches. But as you stated, you got to make that play if you're going to be a top end wide receiver in the NFL. And you have Josh Downs coming in as a rookie, making all of these plays, and here you are in your second year, and you can't seem to get more than 3 catches a game. But granted, your targets have gone up, but
And one thing that I find interesting, I knew we were going to talk about this, and I started thinking back. There was a play, I think it was sometime in the back half of last season, where he got absolutely rocked, a la Austin
oh,
Collie, like coming across the
don't
middle.
scare me like
And
that.
I know, but it's one of those scenarios where I don't know if he's almost playing. When you have something like that happen, it can mentally mess with you. You,
Yes.
you start hearing footsteps and the dropsies start coming in. I mean, we see it all the time with, I think it was Kadarius Toney for the Kansas City, that first game of the year. I mean, he dropped like 5 passes. Just guys were getting close, just hit him in the chest because he was turning around looking, where the defense was coming from. And you just can't have that. look, I get it. The play that I'm complaining about down the field,
Hmm.
he had two guys on him. It was good coverage, but there was an opportunity for him to make the catch, and you have to make those catches.
I'm with you there. I'm
It,
with you.
and I mean, I don't know, I we talked about this. I didn't get a chance because I wasn't on the podcast at the time, but I had written down my kind of keys before the season, and I was really concerned with Chris Ballard only keeping four wide receivers. And we talked in week one, like, oh, sweet, our tight ends are awesome. Here's the plan, maybe. What I don't understand is you have Isaiah McKenzie back there, whose basically only job right now is fielding punts, and which he was hit or miss on, on Sunday. But what I don't know that he's gotten like more than one or two snaps on the offensive side of the ball as a wide receiver.
He got
And
7 this past Sunday. Like I
did he?
mentioned that they are very slowly on the rise. So I don't know if it's game planning or if they just have been asked trying to see if they can show him if he can show them something at practice, which
Right.
either or could be the case. And I don't know, they may just be incorporating him even more as Alec Pierce continues his struggles. I don't know. I'm not a coach.
That's my question. You're right on right there. I'm not a coach, but my question is: so you had one target, one run reception for 3 yards on Sunday. This is a guy who was outside of Gabriel Davis, like Josh Allen's probably favorite wide receiver. You have Stephon Diggs, but when he's getting double covered every play, it's not always easy to throw to him. I McKenzie was always making plays for them, so I can't imagine that he came here thinking that he was just going to be a punt returner,
Right.
calling for fair catches like 7 times a game. So maybe if I'm, in Shane Steichen's shoes, you throw Josh Downs on the outside for a couple plays, and then you put Isaiah McKenzie in the slot and see what they can do. Draw up a couple plays and see how different the receiving core looks, because while Alec Pierce might be a great pass blocker, might be a great run blocker, pass blocker on screenplays, I mean, a great run blocker, your job as a wide receiver is to catch the ball. If you can't do that, then if you're a one dimensional guy on a wide receiving core that doesn't run, the triple option, then you might be in trouble. So, um, I the other piece to this is I was really high on Juwan Winfrey, so I think he's sitting on our practice squad currently.
He's been elevated all 3 games for
Maybe give him a shot. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. Maybe there's some kind of magical Alec Pierce juju that happens in practice that we don't see, but I don't know, man. I am not a huge fan as it stands.
I feel like I keep beating a dead horse by saying time will tell, but we're going into week 4. The season's already almost a quarter over. So I don't know how much more time that you could give him per se. But I don't know. We'll find out. We'll see. I'm very curious to see, and we'll get into this with the preview with how they're going to attack the Rams this coming Sunday. And
Well, and who's going to be the quarterback, right? So,
yeah,
like, that's the one
which
where I'm
which
not.
which
I'm,
Richardson and Kelly are both expected, keyword expected, to clear concussion protocol this week.
well, that's great to hear, and that might be the one caveat that I need to take a step back. And I'm harping on Alec Pierce really hard the last 3 weeks. He hasn't had the same quarterback consistently for more than like 2 quarters at a time. So other than Minshew this week,
Also
and
fair.
who's somebody he wasn't catching passes from probably 90% of camp. So you know maybe we'll see. Maybe this weekend. Who knows? I don't know. We can keep saying that until we're blue in the face until he starts making some plays.
Yeah, I agree. But anywho's, I mean, I really don't have much else to cover. I think we hit about every position. I mean, I can sit here and praise Matt Gay for smoking field goals left and right, but that was pretty much the opener. And, overall, I'm just extremely happy that we're sitting at 2-1 right now. We're controlling the AFC South. Pat McAfee's already throwing out there, we're tied for 4th in the entire NFL.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and I want to be clear. I mean, this last little rant has been, obviously a little bit negative, but I mean, I have nothing but I'm so excited for the game Sunday. Like I said, I was telling you offline, I'm so excited for the game Sunday that I'm thinking about just going down and buying a ticket and going. But
Dude,
I do have a few more. If you're out of kind of things you wanted to talk, I had a couple other at least storylines that I'm kind of keeping an eye on moving forward, and maybe mention before we go
I say
here.
by all means, we're kind of in a shoot the bull session. So whatever you got, fire away.
Yeah, yeah. So one of them being, my assessment after watching the game Sunday, and you kind of alluded to this earlier with Shaq. I didn't see him a ton, and when I did, one place really stuck out to me in the first quarter when Lamar Jackson scrambled, from like 10 or 15 yards out for that touchdown. It looked to me, and if you watch that in replay, the angle that they show as Lamar kind of cuts on the replay to go inside and he actually scores. Shaq had him the entire way. His head was fixated on him. And something that I feel like we have not seen from Shaq in the past prior to injury is indecisiveness and hesitancy. And what you can see is Shaq hesitates and kind of rocks back, and then Lamar Jackson just darts into the end zone, and Shaq doesn't hit him until he's basically on the goal line, and he just looks super slow. So I know we've talked about this every week, and it's not because we're harping on him as a player. It's because we've seen how good he is when he's healthy. So I just don't know if this is because of the injury or if it's because of like a mental thing with he's it's got to be extremely hard to come back from a injury and not worry about having it re-aggravated. So I'm just curious what's going on there, because
Yeah,
the way I look at it right now, he's clearly the third best linebacker on this team. I mean, EJ Speed has been
his
obviously,
stock is rising so fast.
yeah, Zaire's unbelievable, and then EJ Speed has played incredible. So I mean, Shaq's clearly the third best linebacker here. I don't know. Hopefully, the emergence of EJ Speed can kind of provide the stability that we need at linebacker until, fingers crossed, enough reps or enough time passes where we start to see the old Shaq. Because right now, he's not the fly around, hair on fire, turnover creating player that we're used
We're
to.
not seeing the maniac.
Yeah, he's at times been kind of a liability, frankly. And so, yeah, I don't know. That's something I have. We've talked about it all 3 weeks so far, but that's something I have to keep my eye on because it didn't really look any better this week either.
Yeah, and what I alluded that his snap count was considerably down into the mid 50% of defensive snaps played. Now, whether that was scheme or game or going into the game that was planned, I don't know. But I'm with you there. I mean, his explosiveness is not back. And it almost seems like, with that hesitancy comment that you made, I don't even know if he still has confidence in his body yet again. Because as an
Right.
athlete, and you played sports as well as I did, and you know damn well as I do that if you don't have confidence in your physical nature, right, you're not going to go into something 100% and be fully dedicated to that moment. In baseball, if it's going in, trying to execute a pitch on the outside corner, you're not going to fully commit to it. Football, you're not going to, throw your whole body weight into a tackle. You're not going to Michael Pittman and just go up and regardless of human life and go get a football.
Right.
So I don't know. I just, I wish I could sit down and talk to Shaq and really just, one on one and see how he's doing, right? But
Yeah.
because personally, he's a really good dude. He's an awesome guy. He cares for the team. He cares for the city of Indianapolis, the fans, the game of football as a whole, and like you just wish him well. And you don't want to see this from somebody like that. And with somebody of his caliber and the resume that he's already put together in his young career, you don't want to see such a sharp decline and really start to question, like, is this the new normal?
Yeah. No, I mean it's unfortunate to see because like I said, we know what he's capable of and he's still we can see it. He's still barking out orders on the field. So he's still an incredible leader. It's almost just that intrinsic, knack that he's missing that confidence,
Hmm.
that little voice in his head that's like telling him just to freaking go for it and light somebody up. I mean, we're not back there yet, but like I said, so far our defense has played so well, our linebackers have played so well overall that it hasn't hurt us. But it's something to keep an eye on because I'm pretty sure from what I saw, Zaire and Shaq started the game, but there's going to come a time where, like we've already talked about with Shane Steichen and accountability, it doesn't matter who you are, how much money you're making on this team. If somebody's playing better than you, they're going to get more snaps. So
Hmm.
there could come a time where, even if it's short term, EJ Speed and Zaire Franklin are on the field to start the game because, truthfully, they're making more of an impact on our defense. But
Yeah, agreed.
no, I just and that kind of leads me into my last point on the defense, and it's hard to. This is you're probably going to want to punch me in the face after this one, but I, it's hard to nitpick things when our defense has played so well and they've exceeded expectations. But one thing, one of my buddies was asking me about how I felt about the game, and we were looking at some of the stats. Our defense has 12 sacks through 3 games. That being said, 6 of them were in the Texans game. I feel like if there's something I'd take away from this Ravens game, and we saw that when the Colts were able to get pressure and collapse the pocket on Lamar Jackson, bad things happen. We've already established that. What I would like to see is, and it doesn't always have to result in a sack or a sack fumble. I just want to see more quarterback rushes because and maybe my eyes are playing tricks on me, but it felt like in both the Jacksonville game and the Ravens game, there were times where Trevor Lawrence and Lamar Jackson had like 8 seconds back there just hanging around. I mean, when you give elite quarterbacks that kind of time back there, they're going to find the Mark Andrews, they're going to find the Evan Ingrams, and it hasn't hurt us to this point. We've gotten, it hurt us in the Jaguars game, but I mean, I don't think a lot of people had us winning that anyway. We're 2-1 through 3 games, which is exceeding expectations. But I have a feeling if we're going to continue winning games this season, we're really going to have to rely on our defense because you're bringing along, hopefully, a healthy Anthony Richardson. He's not going to have a great game every game. He's not going to be able to run for 2 or 3 touchdowns every game. So our defense is going to have to put us in positions to win games if we're going to continue this trend this year. And that starts for me with getting more sustained pressure on the quarterback. So the sacks are great. The stats look good through 3 games, but there's a lot of drives that I can think back on from the Ravens game and the Jaguars game where we just gave them way too much time in the pocket. And quarterbacks in the NFL are going to make plays.
Hmm.
Maybe not Zach Wilson, but most of the other ones are going to make plays. So that's kind of my like last soapbox comment. That being said, it's a great thing that I'm complaining about. We need more pressure, we need more sacks because we could be talking about an 0-3 team right now. I'm just saying we're starting to see the return of a competitive football team in Indianapolis, and for them to continue that trend, these are the things that they're going to have to clean up. Sustain pressure, you know, quit the stupid penalties on the offensive line. We can't be continuing to get false starts on snap counts, things like that. And I know Shane is the kind of coach that is going to clean these things up because we can see it. I mean, we had that something that we haven't mentioned yet, the whole timeout debacle with, running the kicking team on, kicking team off, offense on. This guy gets it. He knows how to play the nitty gritty game in game with the coaching decisions. So he's not going to let penalties fly, and he's not going to let stupid mistakes fly. And I think we'll get that stuff kind of cleaned up, but it's just some things that I've noticed that you know, we got to find something to nitpick, right? Otherwise, there's nothing to talk about.
That's completely fair. And about that Shane Steichen, one of these games, he's going to pull this and he's going to run some wicked, stupid play and get a touchdown out of it. You watch, it'll happen.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
yeah, I love that kind of stuff, man. There's so many times over the years when I watch football, and you sit there, and it's easy to be the quarterback, on the couch quarterback, like, or the coach on the couch, like. I've always like, why not make a strategic decision. What's the worst case scenario? And I think I had a buddy of mine that was complaining, like, kick the field goal, kick the field goal. I'm like, dude, what's the worst that's going to happen? It's going to go from a 22-yarder to a 27-yarder. Like, and we obviously know Matt Gay can hit those. So all you've done is force, the opposing coach to take a needless timeout that he could have used at the end of the first half.
mhm.
And I mean, I love that kind of stuff, man. As long as it doesn't, backfire. There's a difference between doing stuff like that and then, sending out a punt unit with one guy under center and snapping it. Like there's difference between being cheeky, you know, on those, those type of plays. So I loved it. I really have liked what I've seen out of Shane Steichen so far, and I'm excited, for the rest of this season for sure.
Yeah, it's going to be really, really interesting to see how all of this trickery continues to evolve. And if you hear anything in the background, my dog is dreaming very heavily right now. So that
I couldn't hear it, but
it
maybe the
may
folks at home
it
will.
may get picked up. We'll see. Uh,
Um, one last thing, I know I keep saying that. I do. This has nothing to do with really the play on the field. Huge shout out to Colts Nation. Every time they panned the camera around the stadium, I saw blue and white Colts jerseys and apparel everywhere throughout the
I did
stadium
too.
in
I
Baltimore.
did too.
So that was an absolutely great showing by our fans. And I've been to games like that on the road. I've been to those types of games at the Texans. And whether people think it makes a difference or not, it does, because the players can hear you. I mean, I remember at one point I was sitting in the corner of the end zone in Tennessee, and Paris Campbell caught a touchdown down there. And they all ran down there. They're pointing up. I mean, half the lower level crowd was Colts fans, and they're like, all the players on the field are getting fired up. So they see that stuff, man. And for a game that looked like it was probably going to be a whooping that we were going to get served, our fans showed up, and that made all the difference, I would say, out there as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, because for sure, especially in an environment like Baltimore where they hate us. Um, that's bless up to Colts Nation for continuing your support. And if you're a listener that was at the Baltimore game, uh, well done, well done, seriously. But man, we run long. We had a lot to chat about, and I didn't think this was going to last that long.
Yeah, it seems like when I'm coming up with stuff during the winning episodes, it's like, I got to find more to talk about because it's easier to complain about stuff. But no, we had a lot to talk about, and you mentioned right there, if there was anybody that's listening that was at the game or is going to the game this Sunday, drop us a line on Facebook or Twitter and tell us how your experience is, or if anybody has any questions or anything like that, send them to us, and we'd love to have more stuff to address from fans and get you guys engaged as well.
Absolutely. Say we're pretty active on social media, Facebook and X, whatever social media platform you can find us on. Do it. We'll definitely interact with y'all. So
Yeah, we should probably we'll put our X handles in the podcast info here, so that for the episode, so that you can find us online.
yeah, let's do that. All right. We'll record here in another day or two after we see some practice reports coming up for the Rams. That should be a really fun one to talk about, especially with some of the playmakers that the Rams have developed this year with Kyron Williams and Puka Nakua. That'll be a really fun one to get into. But till then, Blake Waters with Jordan Brock, a la JB, Mr. Negativity, super toxic guy. We'll get back with y'all on the next one. Thanks again for listening. Take care.
Undertaking the podcast is brought to you in part by the Wilbert Group. The Wilbert Group offers a wide range of products and services that support funeral homes and cemeteries in their service to families. Building on its heritage since 1880 as the innovative leader in burial vaults, the Wilbert network of nearly 300 facilities throughout the United States and Canada can help funeral service providers meet the needs of both burial and cremation families. The combined strength of the Wilbert network and rigorous quality controls over the fabrication of Wilbert burial vaults is unparalleled in the industry and ensures product quality and consistency no matter where you are located. For more information on Wilbert burial vaults and other products, or to locate a Wilbert provider in your area, visit wilbert.com and click on the Funeral Professionals banner on their homepage.